Hello and welcome back to Findlay Designs. Today's video I wanted to create something that was a little bit different to my normal bending resin bowls. I wanted to create something that had a bit more structure and was not just free form and letting the resin do what it wanted. I wanted to control it in a manner that I could create something that was a little bit different. So I've come up with my lotus flower. Now for this it wasn't as much of a challenge as I thought it was going to be, but it was very satisfying to get this and seeing the end result. So to create the shapes, the flower shapes here, I used some hot glue on the cellophane, but you could use baking paper, and I'm going to try one with baking paper just to see how it shapes and things and how it bends. So I will do one with baking paper or parchment paper, so I do intend to do that. And so it initially started off as going to be four layers, but 4 layers was just too much, so I then opted for using the 3. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So I started out by creating the flower shape, which I printed out onto an A3 sheet and then covered in plastic. I stuck it down just to make sure that it didn't move, and then added some hot glue to the outside of the shape, making sure that there was no gaps in the hot glue for the resin to sneak out of, and going back over any areas where the hot glue was a little bit on the thin side. Now I'm using cellophane that you can get from your local florist, but you can use any plastic for this, one that will withstand the heat of the heat gun, or baking paper or parchment paper. So for this project you will need 3 flowers, so for the different layers. Like I say, I initially done 4, but for this you actually only need 3, so do this 3 times over, and then we'll move on to the next area once the hot glue has cooled down a little bit. So next, mix up your resin. I'm using Angel White pigment paste from Resin for the white base colour, and I'm just adding a small amount at a time and allowing the resin to move out to the outer edges of the petal. I'm using a plastic knife to help with the flow of the resin and moving that out, and then just slowly going to add more as I need more resin, being careful to not put too much and have the resin leaking over the side. If it does leak over, don't worry, you can actually clean that off, and it's quite easy to trim once this is cured enough. And with the hot glue, that it just gives you a nice defined line on where you need to trim your resin back. So let your resin sit for about half an hour or so, and then add your colour. I'm using Resin liquid pigments for this. I started out using a knife to add it to the outer edge, but it wasn't quite enough, so I then go back in a little while and add a drop directly onto the resin, and then using the knife just swirl that about to gently mix the colours from dark to light into the centre of each of the flowers. And then we'll do the same for each one of those, and then just slowly build up the colour until you get the intensity of colour that you're looking for. Once you're happy with how each of the flower petals are looking, it's then time to leave it to semi-cure. So that can be anything from 3 to 6 hours depending on the temperature of your room. So in the winter it would normally take 5 or 6 hours for me here, and in the summer it can be 3 to 4. So just keep checking on it until it's no longer sticky, and then when it's no longer sticky, it's then time to move to the next phase. So it's been 6 hours for me, and it's now time to place these into different size bowls for the effect. So I'm just trying out different ways to do this, but then I opted to place it inside each of the bowls and then let them cure overnight. And just make sure that you're wearing a glove when you do this, and that you don't mark the resin too much. So it's the next day and these have been curing for about 14 hours, so it's now time to remove the plastic and the hot glue. Now you need to be careful when removing the hot glue that you don't rip the resin, because the resin is still going to be quite flexible at this point. So being quite careful and using a knife and some scissors to gently remove that hot glue. Now you will need to manipulate it a little bit, and because in some places it will be a little bit more difficult to come off, but if you're very careful you will be able to get this off quite easily. I found that once you found an edge and you were able to start peeling it back, it then peeled away without a great deal of fuss. So for some of them that are in some of the other bowls, it was better working from the inside out to the outer edge. That way you're less likely to rip the resin. And then once the hot glue is being removed, you can then place it back into the bowl to allow it to sit for a few days to fully cure and harden up, because as you can see the resin is still quite flexible at this stage. So once you've removed all your plastic and hot glue and you are ready to place it back in the bowl, we're going to shape the edges of the petals a little bit more by using some sellotape to pull those corners in a little bit, just so you've got more of a curve and that each of the petals is not completely flat and it's more uneven and more random looking. I found that I had a little bit of extra glue on there, which I'm just removing, and then I'm going to go back and just make sure that I've got them looking how I want them to look. So we're going to do that with the other pieces as well. Just remove the plastic, the hot glue, and then place them in the bowl, and then using some sellotape to just shape those petals so they've got a slight curl on the outer edge. And this one where we had a little bit of leakage from the resin going over, I'm just going to trim that off with some scissors, which comes off quite easily because we can just follow the shape of the resin like so, and then place that in there, and then this is going to be left to cure overnight. So sorry, this has been curing now for 3 days, so now it's time to remove all the sellotape. This one I moulded round a small vase just so I got more of a curl happening on the centerpiece. And then using some leftover resin from another project, doing my kitchen splashback, which video will be coming very soon for that. I'm now going to glue these pieces together, and I'm making sure that the resin is spread out to the outer edges of each of the petals just to give it a little bit more added strength. And so I'm just going to do that top and bottom, and then place these on top of each other, making sure that the petals are not completely over the top of each other and that you can see the other petals below. So just arrange that so that the top ones are then overlining where the gaps are, if that makes sense. And then this is going to be left overnight to cure, and again, like I say, I'm just making sure all the petals are completely covered in the resin for some added strength. And then I poured the remainder of the resin in the center so I had a nice flat surface for placing an LED candle, which you'll see a photograph of at the end, so that's got a nice flat surface for that. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up, or better still, subscribe to my channel. If you are new to resin and are looking for some extra help or would like to see the full length of this video tutorial, then please go and join my members only website, Sue's Creative Circle. Here I'm putting together a series of beginner videos as well as making more in-depth videos to help you on your resin journey. You will find a link for the new group in the description below, along with some other handy links to the products used and my Instagram, Facebook groups, etc, etc. So until the next video, bye for now.